Have you ever stopped and wondered if your voice, really matters in the grand scheme of politics? Well, today we're going to dig into that. We're exploring all the different ways we participate, from just casting a vote all the way to taking to the streets. We're going to get into how power actually works and how people, just like you and me, try to shape it.
Really, it all boils down to this one single question. How do our wants and needs, whether it's for something small like a new park or something huge like a major policy change, how do they make that journey from our everyday lives all the way to the people in charge? Let's trace that path step by step.
All right, so here's our game plan. First, we're going to look at what we're calling the political machine. Then, we'll see how it's supposed to get its fuel through all the official channels. After that, we'll dive into what happens when those channels just don't work, and zoom out to see the huge global forces at play. And finally, we'll tie it all together to figure out what it all means for the power of the people. Sound good? Let's jump in.
Okay, first things first, we need to understand the basic setup. And it really helps if you think about the whole political world as a kind of giant machine, a system that has inputs, a process, and of course outputs. So what is a political system anyway? Well, at its heart, it's the process that takes in everything from society, all the demands, all the needs, all the support from its citizens, and then converts all of that into actual results, like laws and government decisions. It's basically the engine that turns public will into government action.
And this image here gives us a fantastic visual for this whole idea. It's based on the work of a political scientist named David Easton, who pictured the political system as a kind of black box. See on the left there? We, the citizens, provide the inputs, things like our demands for better schools or our support for a candidate. That goes into the central black box, where the gears of government turn, and then out the other side come the outputs, the policies that shape our lives.
Let's break that down into 4 simple steps. Step 1, we've got the inputs. Step 2, the system, that black box, does its thing. Step 3, we get the outputs. And this last one is so important. Step 4 is the feedback loop. What the government does directly influences our next set of demands and how much we support them. It's a constant, moving cycle. So, if the system is a machine, how do we feed it? What are the official, established ways for us to get those inputs of demand and support in there in the first place?
Well, this is where groups like interest groups and pressure groups come into play. Now, these terms are often used together, but basically, an interest group represents a whole slice of society, think farmers or teachers, while a pressure group is usually laser-focused on a single issue. We're talking about trade unions fighting for better wages or environmental groups pushing for climate action. Their entire job is to be a formal doorway into that political black box.
And the role these groups play is absolutely crucial. They take a whole mess of individual opinions and bundle them into clear, focused goals. By bringing people together, they create a voice that's way louder and more unified. They make sure the government actually talks to the people who will be affected by its decisions. At the end of the day, they're a vital part of what makes a democracy actually work.
But what happens when those official channels feel more like a brick wall? When the interest groups don't speak for you and the political parties feel a million miles away, what happens when it feels like the machine just isn't listening?
This quote from our source material really just hits the nail on the head. For so many people, especially those in marginalized communities, the whole formal system of parties and groups can feel like a club they're not invited to. Their voices, their needs, they just get lost in the shuffle.
So, yeah, what's the alternative? When the front door is locked, people don't just give up and go home. They find another way to make themselves heard.
And that alternative is the social movement. This is a totally different ballgame. It's less about quiet lobbying in hallways and more about loud, collective public action. It's informal, it's less structured, but wow, it can be an incredibly powerful way for people to demand change.
So what makes them so powerful? Well, for one, they operate outside the official rulebook, which makes them easy for anyone to join. And by bringing huge numbers of people together, they can create a kind of political pressure that governments just can't afford to ignore. They literally become a megaphone for the voiceless.
All right, now we need to zoom out for a minute, because none of this happens in a bubble. The struggles people are facing and the movements they're building are deeply, deeply connected to a much larger global system. You know, that fight for better wages in a factory, or that protest against a company polluting a river, or the demand for fair trade, these issues that feel so local are, more often than not, the direct result of a global economic structure.
This map here helps us visualize that global setup. Theories like dependency theory and world systems theory help us make sense of it.
They basically argue that the global economy isn't some level playing field. Instead, it's divided into a dominant core and a dependent periphery. You can almost see how the core countries, the wealthy industrialized nations, pull raw materials and cheap labor from the periphery, creating this cycle that keeps the inequality going.
Let's look at that relationship a little closer. On one side, you have the core. These are the dominant economic powers that control the capital and the high-tech industries. On the other side, you have the periphery, nations that often supply the raw materials and the low-cost labor that fuel the core's economy. This creates this flow of wealth that's often very one-sided, moving from the periphery to the core and locking in that state of dependency.
And this is the critical connection. This global imbalance of power and wealth is very often the root cause of the problems that drive people to form social movements in the first place. It's the engine of injustice that fuels the fight for change, right there on the ground. So, after looking at the machine, the official channels, the people's megaphone, and the whole global picture, what's the big takeaway from all of this? Where does that leave us? I think it's this. Participation is everything. It's the whole ballgame. Whether it's through the slow, patient work of an interest group or the loud, urgent cry of a protest, it's the active involvement of people in their own political story that pushes society forward.
You know, the philosopher Hannah Arendt put it so well. She believed that when we engage in political action, we're doing something fundamental to being human. It's how we actually shape the world we share and become who we're meant to be as part of a community.
So all of this leaves us with one final, pretty big question to think about. In our incredibly complex, interconnected world, with these massive political and economic systems, is collective action, people coming together, the ultimate form of power we have left? It's definitely something worth chewing on.